South Korea and the United States press ahead with their joint military drills amid intensifying tensions with North Korea in the region. The South Korean army is conducting the large-scale war games in the Sea of Japan with the U.S. strike group led by an aircraft carrier. The joint exercise, which seeks to test capabilities to track and intercept ballistic missiles launched by North Korea, is set to continue until sometime next week. The new phase of the joint war games came after the two nations wrapped up a massive annual exercise that involved around 20,000 South Korean and 10,000 U.S. troops. Pyongyang had threatened to sink the American aircraft carrier should it intensify tensions in the region. Seoul and Washington have both expressed concerns over Pyongyang's nuclear activities. However, North Korea says it will not relinquish its nuclear deterrence unless the U.S. ends its hostile policy towards the country. Well, for more on this story, let's go live to Mr. Alexander Azadegan, Senior Geopolitical Analyst and Professor of Strategic Global Management and International Political Economy, who joins us live from Laguna Beach. Mr. Azadegan, thank you so much for being with us. Isn't the U.S. actually poking the bear with a stick? We're talking about North Korea, by holding such joint war games in the region.
Well, Mahtab, that's a given. Of course, they are poking the bear in the stick. And what's more, we have the Chinese involved. Not too long ago, we had a major concentration of the Russians on their very eastern borders with China and North Korea. This is very reckless saber rattling. We've always had saber rattling from Washington, this bogus propaganda, neuro-linguistic programming line of all options are on the table. Now we have this joint exercise, and the North Koreans will see this as a direct threat, not some kind of a military exercise that the narrative in the West, the way they are trying to narrate it in the West is being shaped. They see this as a violation of their sovereignty in their region, in their backyard, in their sea borders. And we have never come so close to conflict as we have been since Mr. Trump has been in office. And these tactics of bullying and intimidating and totally uneducated, totally reckless. We had him not too long ago, before he became president, he was saying all these terrible things about China and picking on China. And then so shallowly and so amateurly, he says he had a phone conversation with the Chinese Prime Minister, and that he's a good guy and that things are going to change, and all these false promises that are ridiculous, and we become the laughing stock for such policies quite possibly being implemented in the Far East.
Mr. Azadegan, why is Trump so bent on, it seems, intensifying the tensions in the already tense region of East Asia and in relations with North Korea? Because it seems that we're now seeing Washington and Pyongyang locked in an ever tighter spiral of threats, counter threats, as you said, and we have never seen such heightened level of tensions in the region, and it's getting worse by the day.
Well, there are two things I like to comment on in response to your brilliant question. The first thing is that DPRK stated that they will not relinquish their nuclear deterrence unless, this is very key here, unless the U.S. ends its hostile policy toward the country. So in a way, from that statement, that official statement, we could reason that maybe the North Koreans are negotiating with Mr. Trump, who sees himself as a chief negotiator in everything, especially when it comes to the Iran nuclear deal, for example. Also, there's this other theory called the madman theory. This is the result of private conversations between Richard Nixon and John Haldeman, who was his what was his direct title? He was the chief of staff for Mr. President Nixon. And in that conversation, which is what Mr. Trump is applying in his foreign policy, is that the more crazy you act, the more you act like a madman, the more the enemy is going to be intimidated that you're actually going to do what you promised to do. In this case, these military exercises, and in this case, Mr. Trump directly threatening, North Korea and telling him not to do what is in their right to do, to test launch the deterrence capability. Except in this case, we have another madman who's playing the same game, the leader of DPRK. And I don't mean to call him a madman. I'm just saying he's applying the madman theory. So that's one perspective. The other perspective is that Mr. Trump is trying to take the Chinese and even the Russians' attention away from the formation of this upcoming Eurasian Confederation. They're trying to create all these false flag conflicts around the world, in this case in North Korea, with Russia. God knows what they have in mind. He wants to negotiate with the Russians. So Mr. Trump's ultimate goal, whether it comes to North Korea or China or whoever will be the troublemaker for China or Russia, is to take them away from their concentration of creating a new Eurasian Confederation, which would be a force of good in order to combat NATO. And in this case, NATO does not apply, obviously, in East Asia, but that is Mr. Trump's policy. I've said this on record before he came into office, and all his advertisement and his promotion of non-interventionism and all these promises of reconciliatory approach is nothing but a decoy.
And one brief final question, Mr. Azadegan. Should we be concerned that an actual war and conflict may break out between the US and North Korea?
The brief answer to that question, Mahtab, is no. There will be no sinking of aircraft carriers. North Koreans know the US, I don't want to call it deterrence power, but this awesome warmongering power of just one aircraft carrier, which is about 6 or 7 vessels, plus a couple of submarines.